Yeah. So let's make it the way we'd like a live rock and roll band to be. And just put out the first thing, even if it comes off the first idea may sound contrived or whatever, let's just go down that road and see where it ends up. And and we're thrilled with it. With
Yeah.
all the songs have come out where everybody's put something into that song.
Hey, everybody, we're here today with Peter Stroud, guitarist. Most of you probably know with Sheryl Crow for many years, and a lot of other people we're going to talk about. Peter, thank you for joining today from your home in Atlanta. Nice to see you.
A real pleasure to be with you, Alan.
Thank you. Um, getting ready to talk to you and going through your discography was really cool. I was familiar with most of it, but seeing it all laid out together is something. You've played with a lot of people, um, and I want to talk to you about what you think you bring to the table as an accompanist, and how much you think it's related almost to like being a piano accompanist to a great singer in those days, in the old days. But you've been with Sheryl Crow off and on for 25 plus years, I believe, in two stints,
Right.
right? So let's start with talking about um, Sheryl. Talk about when you first got together with her as a member of her band. When you get hired for a gig like that, and it might be different now that you have this level of experience, do they someone say to you exactly what they expect, or do they just give you a bunch of songs and say learn them? Like, what's the dynamic like when you become a new member of a band?
Well, I've been in a few different scenarios of since, but when I first joined Cheryl, it was interesting because it wasn't through an audition. I had been with Pete Droge prior to, who's an artist out of Seattle area back in the mid '90s, and he was writing on a hit at the time that I joined with him. And we just had a blast, and we had toured as an opener for Cheryl when her second record came out, or he had actually previously toured with her, and then when I joined Pete, I had jumped on in that same time frame. So that was how I got to know her and her band. And then a few years later, I get a call from her management out of the blue saying that Cheryl has invited you to join the band if you're interested. And at the time, I turned it down because I was still with Pete and we were on a mission. A new album that had just come out. He considered us band members per se and all that. But then, long story short, that sort of came to an end like a couple weeks after I'd received the phone call. Yeah, I know. So back in the push button phone days, it was like, "Hello, is that is that offer still available?" Which it was. And so anyway, when I went to the rehearsals the first time, it was a different kind of feel. When I look back at it, I think the expectations were way higher on me because I was there with a band which was partially new. There was a couple of previous players in the band from her former grouping, but, we had 2.5 weeks to get ready for the tour, and so the expectations on me and the other new members were like, "All right." I could feel the pressure at those rehearsals if it wasn't right, you know?
Yeah.
Cheryl had eyes in the back of her head as well as keen ears of knowing what she wanted to hear, and so you had to gauge how much she'd be worried about, "Oh, did I make the right decision?"
And you're her band leader now, and
Yes.
when did you first become her band leader? And is question one, and question two is part of your role as band leader literally to like if you need a new bass player or whatever, and I know Robert Kern's been with you for a while, but would it be your job to find the bass player and get him up to speed, for instance?
It became that, yes,
Yeah.
and the way it started was in I think it was around 2005 when her album Wildflower came out. She had recorded that album with strings using, the great David Campbell, and he did all the string arrangements, he recorded the strings, And so she decided she wanted to take out a string section, a small string section with David conducting, which was pretty amazing. So just due to the fact that she was launching the new album and all the press and everything with her busy schedule, they asked me to be the interface between the band and David. So that's how it started. Was literally just they needed help. And as time went on, then I sort of assumed the role of band leader, and especially when it came to hiring new players and so forth. Because again, it made it easier for Cheryl if I did it.
Right. So is her job so I mean, is her idea of the band leader so that she's just gonna get up there, play her guitar or whatever and sing and not have to worry about it? And it's up to you to know what she wants behind her and, control the dynamics of the band and so that you're locked in with her and then you're also locked in with the rest of the band?
Pretty much. And that developed more over time. Um, at first, I could tell she wanted to still be in charge of making decisions and so forth, full out the rehearsals, and that was totally fine with me. I was like, well, of course. Hold on, I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. Uh, it's like totally understood that, you make all the decisions you want. Obviously, it's your show, it's you. But I just noticed that over time, I think she enjoyed having somebody else make those decisions sometimes of, "All right, what song are we gonna run through?" Even, at a rehearsal. "What do you wanna do now?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, okay," and so I, over time, just became the guy that would conduct it, and the same with sound checks or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, definitely when it came for learning new material, she might text me and say, "Hey, I want to work up this song for tomorrow's show or whatever. Can you put the word out?" And then I'd get with everybody.
Um, the band now and has for a while, I think, it includes Audley Freed, also on guitar, uh,
Awesome player.
awesome player who, a lot of people have seen him with the Black Crows, with popping up with Government Mule or the Allman Brothers. It was a relationship with Warren Haynes. And
Right.
of course, going back to Cry of Love, and the bass player now is Robert Kern from Cry of Love, who is a band that a lot of people, at least who follow my writing, have a real fondness for. Do you guys ever feel like just letting it rip and tearing it up? Or do you do that at sound check?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of times it's oddly, at the forefront, he'll just start a jam, and we'll just launch into it. Cheryl's way into that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's been a couple of song ideas that might have been born
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And you guys, I guess probably from you, but I've seen you guys share some backstage videos and sound check videos and stuff where it looks great, and obviously it's what Cheryl wants, or she would have a different band. But it seems like you guys are really rocking out as a band, not just a backing band, if you know what I mean. And I think most people have ever played any music at all understand the difference between those two things.
Yeah, and it's actually funny you mentioned that just over the past year, since January, which is really generous on Cheryl's part. She said, "Hey, why don't we get together at the barn?" She has a studio above her horse stables, and and write some songs together as a group, all of us together. Let's get in the room, see what we come up with. And 2 songs, we've come up with 6, I believe. 2 of them have been released, and she said, "Let's call it a band name." So it is now Sheryl Crow and The Real Lowdown is what we
Yeah.
came up with.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
That's really fun.
And yeah, it's great. And so that is really cool on her part. Of course, there is Sheryl Crow, with the hits and everything. And when I helped her put this band together, it was at the time where she was putting out an album with Warner Nashville. And so it was definitely down that country lane, but she had all her pop hits. And I was thinking, okay, at that time, I had a band called Big Hat with Audley, Fred, Robert, Keith Gaddis singing, the late great Keith Gaddis, and Ike Stubblefield. who you may be familiar with as well. And at that time, I thought, well, I have just the band, or at least the nucleus of that would do well, play the country authentically, as well as play her pop and rock and Americana authentically. And that was the group that we have now.
Okay, so you rolled basically your band into becoming her band.
Correct. Yes. At least a portion of it.
Yeah, and, yeah, Ike, I knew Ike pretty well, great keyboard player,
Yeah.
great person. I'm very, very sorry when he passed away. I hadn't been in touch with him in a while. He sat in with my band, Friends of the Brothers, and we played, GABA, in Macon. I think it was 2019, and Jeff Sipe, was one of our drummers for that show, and Jeff and Ike were good friends, and so that's how
Yeah.
Ike ended up hanging around us all day and then sitting in on a song or two. And Ike, by the way, didn't know the Allman Brothers repertoire at all, which was sort of funny and surprising to me. But of course, he did a great job. I think he played on Trouble No More, or one of the straight blues, and on a Hammond B3, and he was great. Um, we're going to talk about. I want to talk about your whole history as a sideman and some of the people you've played with. But before we do that, let's talk about what you're up to now and your new band, with Tom Hamilton of Aerosmith, Close Enemies. Um, Tell me a little bit about that, how you started playing with Tom, and what that group is up to, what we can expect to see in the coming months.
Okay. Yes. So that band came together really uh, due to a friend of mine who is known as a guitar tech of the stars, Trace Foster. I don't know if you've ever crossed paths
No,
with
I
him.
haven't, unfortunately, but I would love to meet him.
Yes, he is currently Angus Young's tech. He's been Angus's tech for the past 10, 12
Okay.
years or so. And he also worked for Aerosmith. He was with that organization forever as Joe's tech first, then Brad, then Tom. And so part of that whole family, he worked for Ron Wood, all these folks. So it's interesting. Trace and I had already begun working together on some projects because he's also a music producer. He's a guitarist first and foremost, but he really made a career for himself as a guitar tech for all these people. He went through a cancer bout, came out of it, and that sort of gave him another shot of adrenaline to pursue playing music again, which I was totally behind. And in that whole interim period, he was out with Aerosmith. They were having to cancel dates during that period where they were in Vegas. He was talking to Tom Hamilton about, you know, let's do something during this time. Tom said, I got all these songs that I would like to jam on or something. And the light goes off as it always does in Trace Foster's head. And he goes, well, I have just the guy to call where we can maybe get together. And so Trace calls me and says, hey, would you like to get together and go up to Boston and let's mess around with Tom? And I said, well, I know just the drummer who would be into that. And I had already become good friends with Tony Brock, the drummer from the Babies, and Rod Stewart and all these other people. And he's from England, but he married a really close friend of my wife,
Okay.
Lynn. And so that's how we became buddies and had always been trying to play together. So that sort of formed the nucleus of it. And then everybody else came in. We have a songwriter, Gary Steer, that has a long history with Trace and me. And then the singer, Chasen Hampton, we found just by, audition, but also word of mouth, and came through a friend of Tom's. That's how we got together about a year and a half ago. We have been writing songs from the beginning. We made the deal to where we come in, we meet here at my house in the basement, and we tried anybody's song idea. What do you got? Okay. And we do not go, oh, that sucks. We see it through until it's a song at the end, and we all share writing credit on it. And so that's how we've written an entire album's worth. That album is coming out. I think it'll be January. maybe February. We're just working out the best way to release it, make sure that everybody's got the time they need. But it's done. It's mastered and in the process of getting ready to come out. We put out 5 singles. They're all on Spotify and have been doing pretty well. They've
Yeah,
been doing well.
that's great. It's very exciting, and it's cool how it seemed to happen organically. Friend of a friend of a friend, and let's get together and jam. It's almost like, obviously, you guys are all not at this point of your career, but it's kind of like, hey, you want to hang out in my mother's basement and play some music?
Well, think about me where I saw Aerosmith back in the day. Get Your Wings was one of my earliest favorite records. So I was a huge fan of Aerosmith all the way through the years, and Tony Brock too. I always joke about with Tony that I met him when he was on his first gig with Rod Stewart. They started the tour in my hometown of Greensboro, North Carolina, and I met him at their rehearsals for that. Just because I was one of those kids that would go bust in
Yeah,
backstage at the local venue in Greensboro.
that's amazing. So, what was the music scene like in Greensboro, and what was your role in it? And like, who were your biggest influences and heroes growing up? And I mean, growing up as a musician.
There was in Greensboro, it was interesting. It was a college town. So because of that, there was a lot of bands coming through on the college scene. There was a good club right across from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, UNCG. It was called Fridays, I think, and REM would play there, and the Bad Brains, and all these bands would come through that I have to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention to because I was in the music school across the street, which was more classical and jazz based. But of course, I paid attention to it. But we had a music scene for clubs, and I was, all through high school. I grew up into the British rock, the Southern rock. I was into all of it. The Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker, ZZ Top. Then the blues stuff like Freddie King was one of my all-time heroes as a kid growing up. Then there was all the British rock, The Who, Zeppelin, you name it. Alvin Lee, everything.
It's interesting because you're in the same age range, anyhow. I think you're maybe a little younger of Jimmy Herring and Warren.
Yeah,
Warren is in Asheville. Jimmy grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, here in Greensboro. So it's just sort of interesting, that's all happening. And is Oddly also from North Carolina?
He is.
Yes.
He is from Burgall, which is a small, one cross street headlight or light, what do you call it?
Yeah.
Street, um, stoplight town. That's on the way to Wilmington.
Well, it's cool that all of you guys were in these different places in North Carolina at
Robert too.
more or less the same time, and listening to music and coming up. And I don't know. It's interesting. There's something there. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a trickle down from the Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker Band, and what was happening at Capricorn and in Macon. When you were young, and trickling down.
Well, it's crazy, and I didn't know that about Jimmy, and I worked in a music store here in Atlanta back in the, late '80s, early '90s, and Jimmy was one of those guys that would come in, we all knew who he was, and I would just pull a guitar off the wall and go, "Hey, man, check out this cool new guitar we just picked up. Check it out," and it was solely just to hear him play.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd run over, plug them into an amp, and then I'd just sit there and go, "Damn," you know?
yeah. I saw Aquarium Rescue Unit in, I guess it was 1992. They were opening for the then reformed Dixie Dregs at the Ritz in Manhattan. And I was pretty new at Guitar World and going to see as much as I could. I'd never seen Steve Morse live, which is why I went. And the great publicist Mark Pucci was working for
Oh, yeah?
ARU, and Mark was really hyping me. You got to get there early, see the opening band. I was like, okay, So I just walked right up to the front of the stage. There was no one really there because they were the unknown opening band up there. And they came out, and I mean, imagine you didn't know they existed. I didn't know that O'Teal Burbridge existed, or Jeff Sipe, or Jimmy Herring or Matt Mundy, you know, who, for those who don't know, is a mandolin player of the same caliber of those other guys, and then, of course, Bruce, and I was just like, "Oh," it was one of
Oh my
the most, epical performances of my, life because of the combination of how great it was and how unknown it was to me, and that I had no expectations other than someone told me to check this band out. And,
yeah.
yeah, and Jimmy was such a nice guy, you know, I met him afterwards, and, you know, he was just sort of like, "Oh, gee, golly, I can't believe someone from Guitar World likes my playing, man, that's incredible." I'm like, "Come on." The guy he was, but anyone who knows Jimmy knows that's not an act, you know, that was very, very earnest.
That's him.
Great, great, incredible player. So how did you, from Atlanta, hook up with Pete Droge, who was, a Seattle guy? And by the way, for those who haven't heard, Pete is great, and I just spent a bunch of time listening in the last day or 2 getting ready to talk to you, and quite honestly, I wasn't clear because I was listening to it streaming, which of this tough stuff I was listening you're on and which you're not. But it's all great, and the interaction between the 2 guitars, which was, you and him, is really cool, and it's sort of similar to my ears to like Mike Campbell and Tom Petty, in terms of the relationship between the rhythm and the lead, and the sort of the I think of as a weave where it's not like you know, one guitar just hanging back and then blowing a solo. It's much more of a 2 guitar interplay. Does that all track with you?
Dead on, yes, and it was my first real experience with that. I'm
Sorry about that.
that's all right. I met Droge through, his producer, Brendan O'Brien.
Atlanta guy. Yeah.
Yep, Atlanta guy, and they recorded at Southern Tracks, the studio that was down at Claremont Road in '85, that was right down the street from the music store where I worked. So I remember clearly when he brought Pete to the store just to buy supplies and introduced me, and, yeah, that was while they were making the record. Didn't think much of it. Then the engineer, Russ Fowler, who was doing that record, told me when it came out, "Hey, man, I think you're gonna really like this record." So I bought it, and it became my favorite record the year it came out, in '95. Um, and then in June of '95, Brendan calls me out of the blue. He goes, "Hey, do you have a passport?" And I just happened to procure a passport in March prior to for going to the Music Messe show over in Frankfurt. And so yes, and he goes, "Great. Have you heard of this guy, Pete Droge?" He totally forgot that, he had introduced us. And he said, "Well, his guitarist quit and they have a European tour beginning next week in a week. Are you interested?"
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Yes." And so there's more to the story, but as far as getting to you to answer, when we first got together, it was there was no rehearsals or anything. It was just jumped in. First show was a big festival in Germany in front of 40,000 people. And I was such a fan of his music already that it was really easy to learn it all. Went there prepared, played with these guys, which was a real eye opener. And from there, the way Pete, as you can tell with his music, it's very backbeat, very relaxed. It's jamming and improvising at the same time. It's looking out for each other. And it's very much in the same frame of mind as it would be with Mike Campbell and
Yeah.
Tom Petty and all that.
I actually saw Pete open for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers at Madison Square Garden. I think it
Yeah,
probably would have been before you were
it
with.
was. I think that was '95.
Um, but he was really great. The show was great. The Heartbreakers were not great at that show I was at. I was really disappointed. I had seen them once years before and loved them, and of course I loved them. And I thought, you know, this was an era. I thought maybe they were like over, you know, and
Yeah.
of course, it just wasn't a great show. And somebody I know, saw Benmont Tench at a party that night or the next night, and he was really upset. And he said, "We just played our worst show in years at Madison Square Garden." And believe me, it's not like it was very professional. It just didn't have it was just a little off. And but I was relieved when I heard he had said that, because I thought, okay, that was just everyone has those nights, even Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Um, and saw them many times after that. Of course, they were fantastic. So, um,
Well, we did, right. Yes. So I joined in June. We did a European tour for a month, and then we did 2 months as opening once again for Petty and the Heartbreakers on the Dogs Have Wings tour. So we did August and September of '95 on that tour. And I think I counted watching at least a segment of 21 shows from that run, and would just marvel over those guys. And to me, that was part of going to school, to learn that whole interaction and interplay between those guys and what we were trying to do with our band.
and did that school help you in the years to come as you started having the opportunity to play with people like Sheryl Crow, and who we're going to talk about in a minute, Sarah McLachlan, Don Henley? Did what you picked up from watching Tom and Mike and the Heartbreakers pay off? And as you
Oh, absolutely. I started listening to board tapes while we were on that tour, and I would just beat myself up of just, man, I'm overplaying. I'm playing too much, or I'm getting in the way of Pete or some, all the stuff that you don't always think about when you're playing, you know. But when you listen back to it, you think, oh man, I just stepped on him there, or, things of that sort. So, yes, it did. And that became more concrete playing with Cheryl and with Don. It was always less, play less. I remember during even rehearsals with Don, and Stan Lynch was co-producing the albums with Don during the time. And Stan Lynch saying, while we were working up a show for, what was it? It was Storytellers, I think. That was my first show with Don, was for a Storytellers. And so we're reworking songs.
Yeah, and that's a very high profile thing to be your first gig. I mean, it's going to be captured and seen by
Yeah.
millions of people,
Yeah.
not that 20,000, which is enough, big enough.
Yeah. And so we're doing it. And during the rehearsal, Stan would just look at me and go, play less. No, play less. In his humorous kind of way. I don't know if you've ever talked to him before. He's a hoot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And, but he knew what he wanted too. And it was like, oh, the lesson, or I'll put it that I was being schooled throughout a long period of time, to where it finally got to the point where I began feeling confident of knowing how to work off of the singer. When you're playing as a sideman, that's obviously what you're supposed to do. You were supposed to make that performer feel incredibly comfortable and not be distracted, not looking over their shoulder like, what did I just hear that I didn't want to hear? Kind
right.
of thing.
Um, who else was in that band with Don Henley? Was Stan playing in the band?
No, he wasn't. Let's see. We had, there was Will Hollis on keyboards, Mike Thompson. Both of those guys still play with the Eagles in their backing band. We had the bass player, Lance, now plays with the Dirty Knobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lance Morrison. And then the drummer, shit, I'm blanked on his name. I haven't seen him out playing in quite some time. We had and then Danny Reyes, Daniel De Los Reyes. I don't know if you cross paths with him. He plays with Zach Brown band now.
Was Don intimidating as a boss? Because I feel intimidated by him, and he has that air. There's a lot of stories about him, and obviously one of the landmark artists of our era. But was he scary at all to play with? As
It's interesting. I've had this discussion with people. It seems like the larger the star, the less intimidated I am, for whatever reason. And I think it was because they were so bigger than life that, to me, it was like, whatever. They're I found them more approachable. I don't know. It's not always the case. I was actually more intimidated meeting Mike Campbell than I would be, Don, or even Petty for that matter. I don't know what it was, but with Don, it was really easy. And I had seen the Eagles in the heyday when Hotel California came out.
Yeah.
And then I saw him doing the Building the Perfect Beast tour. And I was like, well, damn, I could have just listened to the record, you know, because everything was, including the Eagles, on that Hotel California tour, picture perfect. Everything sounded great. Did you see those guys during that time?
I did, but I was, young enough to not be super tuned into the differences between those different types of shows. And I was just so excited that I was seeing the Eagles, that probably to my ears, it just sounded right to be. But, around the same time, I mean, within months, I could look up the dates. I saw the Grateful Dead. I saw the Allman Brothers. I was seeing all these guys for the first time. I must have, on some level, understood the difference between what the Grateful Dead was doing and the Eagles, but I don't remember how I intellectually processed that. I think I was just so excited to see either or both of them. Uh, it was just a thrill to be in the room with them. I was at that phase. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, that's what the Eagles were always famous for. I mean, being perfect and,
perfect.
uh, you know, um, so
And that carried through. And so I saw it. And then when, you know, I had the chance to audition, he had auditioned all these guitars, and this sort of gets into what you're talking about, as far as what your role is with a sideman and so forth, band leader or whatnot. But he had auditioned a lot of guitarists, and none of them were cutting it. And I was like the 18th guy in.
wow.
He had been trying to find somebody LA based, couldn't find it, and it was actually, from what I understand, it was Mike Campbell and Dan McCarroll who had suggested me to him, if I'm correct. Dan McCarroll definitely, because he called me. He's the drummer that had played with me with Pete Rose at the time, and he's now a record executive, but a killer drummer. But so Cheryl calls me the next day, and she goes, "What are you doing chasing down the Henley gig?"
Yeah,
I said, "Oh, no, no, I'm not. My name was just thrown in the hat. Hey, if you're busy, if you're gonna," she had already said she was gonna take the year off.
yeah,
And I said, "But if you're gonna be working, I'm yours. I don't, whatever."
yeah,
And she goes, "Oh, no, no, I'm gonna take the year off. I'll put in the good word for you," which she did.
yeah.
And so
And you go ahead, sorry.
Henley just he calls me personally. And he goes, "Cheryl says you can Xerox a song, and that's what I'm looking for." And so literally, I went into rehearsals. I had the songs down, just like seeing the Building the Perfect Beast tour or whatever, verbatim, sounds, parts, everything. And I got the gig.
Yeah.
And I was like finding out that everybody else that came in was just not paying that close attention.
What was it, what was the experience like of doing that night in and night out? Was it, fun in this sort of very challenging way to play things exactly the same way? Did it become I mean, to me, that would require, like, an extreme level of focus. Uh, I mean, all playing a music always requires an extreme level of focus, but in a different way, where you know that if you even put the accent on the wrong quarter note, somebody's gonna notice and give you a look. Is that like a fun challenge, or is it like a drag because it becomes too rote?
I'm sure it's different things for different people, but I did embrace it as a challenge. Yeah, obviously, there was an initial time segment where I'm just marveling over the fact that I'm even there, standing next to him playing Desperado,
Yeah,
you know, or Your Heart of the Matter was one of my all-time favorite songs, which coincidentally he co-wrote with Mike Campbell, you
right.
know. So I was playing Mike's 12-string part. So there was that whole period of just like really getting my footing and sort of getting through that. And then as the tour went on, it was a long tour. It was a year and a half. It did get to the point where, okay, this is getting a little mundane. I'm playing the exact same thing every night. And so I treated it like theater or classical music where you just try to get inside of every single note.
Right, and yeah, the theater is a good analogy. You know, I've gone and seen some incredible performances on Broadway. Like Wendell Pierce, one of my favorite actors, was in Death of a Salesman a couple years ago, and I saw that, and just a totally powerhouse performance that left me like emotionally completely drained sitting and watching it. Then I thought, he's doing this what 8 times a week. You know, it sort of blows the mind, but that's part of the skill is being able to channel that emotion without being completely drained yourself. But did that experience of doing that, and I guess more broadly working with all of these songwriters, and including Sarah McLachlan, who we haven't mentioned yet, of course, Cheryl, Don Henley, where you had to, but the degree to which you had to learn those parts must have helped you understand, like, analyze songwriting.
Yeah.
Because, of course, these are great songs, you know, like, you're talking about Heart of the Matter, you know, Boys of Summer, all that stuff, and the Desperado, et cetera, et cetera. Did you come out of that with, do you think, a better understanding of song construction, composition,
Absolutely.
production, every aspect of putting a great song together?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about the whole perfectionist part of it in terms of Don in particular, but also Cheryl. She was very particular, but we'll start with Don as the example. I mean, they toiled over those songs in the studio and, wore the tape out even during the Eagles days, getting that stuff the way they wanted it to sound. So sort of made sense they wanted to replicate that live because they were just going in the studio and wham, bam, bam, knocking out the songs and going, oh man, that sounds great. We're done, you know, and then going out and playing it live differently. I like both aspects of it. I appreciate artists like that who had put so much into the recording of that song that they want to be able to present it to their audiences the same way because they feel like that's the way the audience wants to hear it,
Right,
you know? Whereas you got the Allman Brothers, or you got even Zeppelin or the Who or something like that, they'll totally twist it
right.
and turn it all around the other direction, you know? Cheryl was a little of both. She'd start out wanting the song to be pretty much the way they recorded it, but over time it would gravitate to where she'd take some liberties with it, or she'd hear something that in the current band even that Audley or I would play, or Jan Gunderman, our keyboardist, and, "Oh yeah, let's go that route with it." Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and Greg Allman, outside the Allman Brothers in his own band, liked to keep things down the middle to the recording, to the extent
Interesting.
that, yeah, that's why JMO never toured with him. There was some point where JMO helped him put a whole band together and ended up not being in it himself because he told me, you know, with what Greg wanted, we could have put a drum machine on a stool back. And, you know, that's not JMO's thing, and it's not something he was interested in doing.
Right.
He was fine. He respected that that's what Greg wanted, but he thought, well, I'm not the guy to do that. But it's really interesting too to go back to what you mentioned that you guys were doing in Close Enemies, that you're doing the songwriting together and everybody is splitting the credits. So much rock and roll history could have been happier or, you know, a conflict avoided if other bands had done that. It caused so, because of course we all know, you know, the band who I was just listening to, right before we talked, I have on vinyl, I have this right here. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, famously, you know, ended up in all kinds of feuds because Robbie Robertson had all the songwriting credits for the most part after the first album. You know, the Allman Brothers, I mean, Barry Oakley wrote the bass line to Whipping Post, doesn't have a songwriting credit. They were very much like whoever brought the song and chord structure in was the writer. But of course, we know that what happens in that rehearsal room is what makes it the song. Like, I think, you know, if everybody had gotten some percentage, things would have been happier. So
Yeah.
how much of that history went into your guys' decision to do that, and how much, I mean, like, whose idea was that? How did that come to be?
maybe I'll claim credit for that. I don't know. It's something that I did also with a band that I had for Big Hat that same thing. At least I said it wasn't with the full band in that case. It was mainly Audley and I and Keith Gaddis that were doing the writing. So I said, all right, between the three of us, let's split it. And the reason being is that, and now that we have in this group where everybody's a capable writer, including our sixth guy, Gary Steer, a very capable writer. So I just didn't want it to be where everybody was just trying to champion their own song and then not put the same amount of attention on somebody else's song or whatever. And then also because we had all been there and done that, I wanted this gig or traced it to everybody wanted this to be like, okay, we are here to have fun with this, to be a total 100% creative outlet. We're in this new industry where we're not trying to prove anything to anyone or please anybody but ourselves and the audience that we feel we want to project this music to. Yeah. So let's make it the way we hear we'd like a live rock and roll band to be. And just put out the first thing, even if it comes off, the first idea may sound contrived or whatever. Let's just go down that road and see where it ends up. And we're thrilled with it. With all the songs have come out where everybody's put something into that song.
Yeah, and it also, can create tensions with what you decide to put on an album, because sometimes band leader guy just wants, the publishing. So I could tell you a lot of stories. I'm sure you know them. We'll protect the innocent and the guilty both. But yeah, or somebody
100%.
wants a better song off to have another one of their songs on a record. So for all those reasons, I think it's such a cool way to do it. And a lot of bands, the Doors did everything four-way. I think that was partly because Morrison wrote most, but not all of their lyrics. They didn't play an instrument. U2 split songwriting credits. REM. I'm sure there are others, but those are ones that come right to mind.
ZZ Top did in the early days, all the way up until the later years, to where I sort of got the impression that after a while, maybe Billy felt like he was the only one that was really showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And, how much of a key to your success do you think is just being a good hang?
So much of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an obvious point, but I think people don't realize it enough. You spend a lot of time with the band, in the studio, but certainly more so on the road.
Yeah.
And so just getting along with one another is really important, right?
It is probably the most important, especially if you're going in as a sideman, so to speak, or whatever, but in any situation. But really, it's like you're already expected to know how to play going in. If you were brought into the band, like when I was brought into Cheryl's band, I think I was probably hired because they went, oh, yeah, he's a nice enough guy. He's cool. He'll be easy. And sure enough, when we were at rehearsals, when I was with Sheryl, she wanted to assemble a little small string trio, a violinist, cellist, actually just two members. She had Lorenzo Ponce and on violin, and ended up with Matt Brubeck on cello, Dave Brubeck's youngest son. And but before Matt came on, I had suggested somebody else, and she said, all right, well, I'm going to call him. This is during the first week of rehearsals. And so she calls my friend, and then when she comes back into the rehearsal room, I said, well, how did it go with the phone call? And she goes, I don't know. He was kind of weird. I went, oh, really? I said, well, he's a fabulous player. And she goes, yeah, but what's he going to be like on the bus? And I was like, note to self.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's cool to have Dave Brubeck's on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I was a big Dave Brubeck fan.
Yeah.
As a kid growing up.
And so you have a SG hanging behind your left shoulder.
I was noticing your Strat.
Well, this Strat is actually, I don't primarily play a Strat, but this is really what I play more. But the Strat is that was Brian Farmer's Strat. You know, Warren's guitar tech.
Oh, okay,
That's a
cool.
good friend of mine, and so when he passed away, I was very happy I was able to get my hands on that. But the SG is sort of your primary guitar, right?
Yes, as of late it has been. With Close Enemies, it became my primary guitar.
Mhm. It's a very versatile instrument, right? Is the
It is. Yeah. I first fell in love with these guitars with the SG Special through Townsend and also Mel Galley of Trapeze. This is when I was a kid. And Tony Iommi, you know. But mainly it was Townsend. It was more the sound of these two pickups together when you listen to Who Live It Leads.
what are those pickups? Those don't look like they're original to the.
They are. They're original. They're the P90s, the original P90s. This one's all stock except for the bridge I'd swapped out. But it's just the spacing of the P90s. When the two together, it almost has sort of that Strat sound between the middle and the rear pickup a little bit. But it's really unique to this. There's no other guitar that sounds like an SG Special in particular to me. And you really hear like the way Townsend on Who Live It Leads was always bouncing back and forth. I even think he just left it in middle position
Yeah,
and just turned his guitar volume up on the rear pickup when he wanted it louder. Yeah, you keep the volumes around 5 or 6. This thing is sparkling clean through like a Marshall or whatever. And or as Townsend a high watt, then you turn it on 10 and it's just railing.
right. Can you get that sound effectively when you're playing in a smaller place? Because you can't crank up that Marshall if you're playing the Iridium.
Right. Well, I use an attenuator between the amp and cabinet. And so that was the other thing for me with Close Enemies is wanting to go back to that straight up half stack kind of mentality. Few pedals, if you know, I even the rehearsals I use no pedals. And then it got to a point where after the songs were recorded and stuff, I had to have certain things going on. But I run the amp where the Marshall's pretty stout, and with the attenuator dropping it down to a proper stage volume to where I consider myself balanced with the rest of the band and with Tony, the drummer. I feel like the drummer always sort of dictates
Right.
where everything else should be.
And do you still have your amplification company?
65 amps? No, I'm not a part of that. It's not gone. My partner, Dan Bull, still has it going on, but I say that it has lied dormant for the past 6 years or so, and he has just recently begun building one-offs here and there for people on request. But no, that was a whole other chapter that was a lot of fun.
Um, well, Peter, thank you very much for your time. It's been great catching up. We could do this for hours, and we'll have to do it again and talk about some of your guitar heroes and influences. But I'm excited to see you guys on the road soon.
Yeah.
Hear the music and help you get the word out for it because it's a great band. And it's a really cool mix of old and new.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, you know? So, yeah, I appreciate that very much and would love to talk with you anytime. This has been a lot of fun, Alan, and a real honor to
Thank you.
talk with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, man.
See you soon.
Okay. Take guitars with the SG Special through Townsend and also Mel Galley of Trapeze. This is when I was a kid. And Tony Iommi, you know. But mainly it was Townsend. It was more the sound of these two pickups together when you listen to Who Live It Leads.
What are those pickups? Those don't look like they're original to the.
They are. They're original. They're the P90s, the original P90s. This one's all stock except for the bridge I'd swapped out. But it's just the spacing of the P90s. When the two together, it almost has sort of that Strat sound between the middle and the rear pickup a little bit. But it's really unique to this. There's no other guitar that sounds like an SG Special in particular to me. And you really hear like the way Townsend on Who Live at Leeds was always bouncing back and forth. I even think he just left it in middle position
Yeah.
and just turned his guitar volume up on the rear pickup when he wanted it louder. Yeah, you keep the volumes around 5 or 6. This thing is sparkling clean through like a Marshall or whatever. And or as Townsend a high watt, then you turn it on 10 and it's just railing, you
Right.
know?
Can you get that sound effectively when you're playing in a smaller place? Because you can't crank up that Marshall if you're playing the Iridium.
Right. Well, I use an attenuator between the amp and cabinet. And so that was the other thing for me with Close Enemies is wanting to go back to that straight up half stack kind of mentality. Few pedals, if you know, I even the rehearsals I use no pedals. And then it got to a point where after the songs were recorded and stuff, I had to have certain things going on. But I run the amp where the Marshall's pretty stout, and with the attenuator dropping it down to a proper stage volume to where I consider myself balanced with the rest of the band and with Tony, the drummer. I feel like the drummer always sort of dictates
Right.
where everything else should be.
And do you still have your amplification company?
65 amps? No, I'm not a part of that. It's not gone. My partner, Dan Bull, still has it going on, but I say that it has lied dormant for the past 6 years or so, and he has just recently begun building one-offs here and there for people on request. But, no, that was a whole other chapter that was a lot of fun.
Um, well, Peter, thank you very much for your time. It's been great catching up. We could do this for hours, and we'll have to do it again, and talk about some of, your guitar heroes and influences. But I'm excited to see, you guys on the road soon,
Yeah.
hear the music and help you get the word out for it because it's a great band. And it's a really cool mix of old and new.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, you know? So, yeah, I appreciate that very much and would love to talk with you anytime. This has been a lot of fun, Alan, and a real honor to
Thank you.
talk with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, man.
See you soon.